The arrest that changes the world. The year 2026 begins with a shock no one officially predicted, yet many quietly feared. News breaks that Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro has been captured. Some reports say it happened during a secret operation. Others claim it was the result of internal betrayal. Details are unclear, but the impact is immediate and global. Markets tremble, diplomats rush into emergency meetings, and military commands across multiple continents are suddenly placed on high alert. This is not just the fall of one man. It is the potential collapse of a fragile global balance that has been held together by oil, power politics, and unspoken red lines. To understand why Maduro's capture could destroy everything, we must first understand who Maduro is in the global system. For over a decade, he has not just been the leader of Venezuela, but a symbol of resistance against U.S. dominance in Latin America. To his allies, he represents sovereignty and defiance. To his enemies, he represents corruption, authoritarianism, and economic collapse. This split perception is exactly why his capture is so dangerous. When such a figure is removed suddenly, the vacuum created is not just political, it is strategic. Venezuela is not an ordinary country. It sits on the largest proven oil reserves in the world. For decades, its oil has been a silent pillar in global energy calculations. Even when sanctions reduced exports, Venezuela remained a crucial what-if factor in energy markets. Traders, governments, and corporations always kept one eye on Caracas. If Maduro is captured, the first shockwave hits oil markets. Prices surge not because supply immediately disappears, but because uncertainty explodes. No one knows who controls the oil fields, the ports, or the contracts. In global markets, uncertainty is often more powerful than reality. But energy is only the first layer. The deeper danger lies in geopolitics. Maduro's government has survived largely because of support from powerful external players. Russia, China, and Iran have all invested heavily in Venezuela, financially, militarily, and politically. For them, Venezuela is not just an ally, it is a strategic outpost in the Western Hemisphere. The capture of Maduro is therefore not seen as a local event. It is interpreted as a direct strike against their influence. This perception alone is enough to trigger a chain reaction far beyond Latin America. From Washington's perspective, Maduro's capture could be framed as a long-awaited victory for democracy and regional stability. But victories in geopolitics are rarely clean. Even if the U.S. denies involvement, suspicion alone can be enough to escalate tensions. History shows us that when a leader aligned with major powers is removed abruptly, retaliation does not always come immediately or openly. It comes through proxies, cyber operations, economic pressure, and destabilization elsewhere. The world has entered an era where wars are no longer always announced. They unfold silently across systems we rely on every day. Inside Venezuela, the situation becomes even more explosive. Maduro's capture does not automatically mean peace or democracy. In fact, it may unleash chaos. The country's power structure is deeply tied to the military, intelligence agencies, and armed civilian groups. Without Maduro at the top, these factions begin to compete. Some claim legitimacy, others seize territory, and some may even align with foreign interests. What follows is not a smooth transition, but a dangerous struggle for control of the state, its resources, and its future. This internal instability has regional consequences. Millions of Venezuelans have already fled the country over the past decade. Sudden collapse of authority could trigger a new migration wave, far larger and faster than before. Neighboring countries like Colombia, Brazil, and Caribbean nations are unprepared for such a surge. Borders tighten, humanitarian systems strain, and regional tensions rise. What begins as a political event quickly becomes a humanitarian and security crisis. Meanwhile, global financial systems react in their own way. Investors hate instability, especially when it involves energy, sanctions, and great power rivalry. Emerging markets suffer first as capital flees to perceived safe havens. Currencies weaken, debt becomes harder to service, and inflation spikes in vulnerable economies. Even countries with no direct link to Venezuela feel the pressure. This is how modern crises spread, not through armies marching, but through algorithms, trading desks, and confidence shocks. Another overlooked danger is precedent. If Maduro can be captured, what does that mean for other leaders who are labeled as undesirable by powerful states? This question deeply worries governments around the world. Some begin to accelerate military programs, others tighten internal security, and many reduce cooperation with international institutions. Trust erodes. The global system, already fragile, becomes even more fragmented. Each state begins to assume the worst intentions from others, a classic recipe for escalation. Social media and information warfare add fuel to the fire. Competing narratives flood the internet within hours. Some celebrate Maduro's fall as the end of tyranny. Others portray it as an imperialist kidnapping. Deepfakes, false reports, and manipulated footage circulate faster than facts. Public opinion polarizes globally, making it harder for leaders to de-escalate without appearing weak. In this environment, even a small incident can spiral into something far larger. By the end of the first week after Maduro's capture, one thing becomes clear. This is not just about Venezuela. It is about energy security, great power competition, regional stability, and the future rules of global order. The systems that keep the modern world functioning are tightly interconnected. When one critical node is violently disrupted, the shock does not stay local. It travels, multiplies, and transforms. This is why the phrase "could destroy everything" is not exaggeration. It reflects the reality of a world balanced on fragile agreements, mutual fears, and economic interdependence. Maduro's capture is not the end of a story. It is the beginning of a much darker and more uncertain chapter. The domino effect of Maduro's capture. As the shockwaves of Nicolás Maduro's capture ripple across Venezuela, the world begins to witness a cascade of consequences that few had fully anticipated. In Part 1, we explored the immediate geopolitical, economic, and humanitarian risks. Now, we must examine how the situation evolves over weeks and months, and why it could spark a global crisis unlike any seen in decades. What starts as a single political event quickly becomes a series of interlinked crises, each amplifying the other. The first domino to fall is Venezuela's internal governance. Maduro, despite being widely criticized, had established a carefully calibrated system that kept competing factions the military, intelligence agencies, and regional party structures in balance. His sudden absence shatters this equilibrium. Within days, rival commanders and political figures begin maneuvering for control. Some regions declare autonomy, while others attempt to align with foreign powers that might back their claim. The country fragments, not into civil war at first, but into a volatile power vacuum, where loyalties shift by the hour. Analysts in Washington, Moscow, and Beijing watch nervously, recognizing that control over Venezuela's resources, especially its oils, the prize everyone seeks. Energy markets are the second domino. Venezuela holds more than 300 billion barrels of proven oil reserves, concentrated in heavy crude that requires specialized refining. Even before Maduro's capture, sanctions and mismanagement had crippled output, but global markets kept a wary eye on any potential supply disruptions. Now, with political instability rising, traders panic. Oil prices spike sharply, crossing thresholds that trigger ripple effects in emerging economies and developed markets alike. Energy importing countries face sudden inflationary pressures, while energy exporting nations experience both opportunity and risk as their revenues fluctuate unpredictably. Unlike traditional crises, this one is complicated by the uncertainty of who controls the oil fields. Pipelines and ports a question that cannot be answered immediately. External powers intensify their involvement, representing the third domino. Russia and China, both of which invested heavily in Venezuelan energy and infrastructure, interpret Maduro's capture as a direct threat to their strategic foothold. Moscow, with its experience in asymmetric conflict and proxy operations, mobilizes intelligence networks throughout Latin America. Beijing accelerates financial support for allies within the country, quietly reinforcing networks of influence. Iran, maintaining close economic and military links, begins coordinating logistical support for factions loyal to Maduro. On the other side, the United States, while publicly cautious, views the event as an opportunity to reassert influence in a hemisphere that has been increasingly challenging for Washington. This alignment of global powers in a single crisis zone sets the stage for a dangerous standoff reminiscent of Cold War confrontations, but with far less predictability. The fourth domino is regional instability. Venezuela's neighbors Colombia, Brazil, and Caribbean nations immediately feel the pressure. Colombia braces for a potential surge in refugees, already struggling with domestic security challenges. Brazil, under a government wary of external interference, strengthens military deployments along its borders. Caribbean nations, dependent on limited resources and trade, face economic strain and heightened security concerns. Regional organizations, such as the Organization of American States (OAS), attempt to mediate, but their influence is limited. National governments prioritize their own survival over coordinated diplomacy. In this environment, even minor border skirmishes or political disputes can escalate quickly, potentially dragging multiple states into conflict. Humanitarian crises emerge as the fifth domino. With Maduro's capture, the country's fragile social services, already stretched by years of economic collapse, begin to unravel. Hospitals run short of supplies, food scarcity intensifies, and power outages become frequent as maintenance staff flee or are reassigned amid chaos. Millions of Venezuelans, many already displaced in previous waves, find themselves facing sudden danger and uncertainty. The international response, though swift in rhetoric, is slow in implementation. Convoys encounter security risks and bureaucratic obstacles, lighting the inability of the global community to react efficiently to fast-moving crises in politically complex zones. What begins as a political shock quickly morphs into a humanitarian catastrophe with long-lasting implications. Cyber and informational warfare amplify the crisis, acting as the sixth domino. In today's hyper-connected world, social media and online platforms become battlegrounds almost instantly. Competing factions and foreign actors flood the digital space with narratives designed to sway public opinion, destabilize opponents, and justify actions. Deepfakes, false claims of territorial control, and doctored videos spread at lightning speed, creating confusion both domestically and internationally. Governments struggle to respond, while citizens face conflicting realities that erode trust in traditional media and institutions. In such an environment, even minor incidents can trigger outsized reactions, escalating tensions into physical confrontations or policy overreactions. The seventh domino is financial contagion. Investors, terrified by the combination of geopolitical uncertainty and energy volatility, begin withdrawing from emerging markets. Currencies in Latin America and beyond experience sharp fluctuations. Commodity prices swing unpredictably, affecting everything from food to metals. Sovereign debt in vulnerable economies becomes more expensive as lenders demand higher risk premiums. Even countries with no direct link to Venezuela feel economic tremors. The interconnectedness of global finance means that a shock in one nation's political system can quickly cascade into a worldwide economic downturn. For multinational corporations, with exposure to Latin American markets, supply chains, contracts, and operational plans are disrupted, creating additional economic instability. The eighth domino involves precedent and international norms. Maduro's capture, regardless of the legality or morality, sets a dangerous standard. Leaders across the globe now face a chilling question: could my government be next? This fear encourages preemptive militarization, covert operations, and increasingly authoritarian internal policies. States that once engaged in cooperative diplomacy begin hedging against worst-case scenarios. The global order, already fragile, begins to fracture along ideological, strategic, and regional lines. Mutual suspicion replaces trust, while the mechanisms of negotiation and international law lose credibility. A single political capture in Caracas becomes a catalyst for worldwide uncertainty and distrust. Finally, the ninth domino is psychological. The world realizes it is more fragile than previously imagined. Populations accustomed to stability are confronted with the idea that a single unexpected event, one president's capture, can disrupt energy, finance, geopolitics, and humanitarian systems simultaneously. This psychological shock affects not only decision makers, but also markets, consumer behavior, and public sentiment. Fear accelerates reactions, creating a feedback loop that magnifies every misstep, misjudgment, and miscommunication. In this sense, Maduro's capture is not merely a political event. It is a mirror reflecting the vulnerabilities of an interconnected global system. The combined effect of these dominoes is staggering. Political instability, energy shocks, great power maneuvering, regional crises, humanitarian disasters, cyber warfare, financial contagion, erosion of norms, and psychological panic interact to create a multi-layered global emergency. The world faces the possibility that local events in Caracas could escalate into scenarios that threaten international peace, economic stability, and human security on an unprecedented scale. Each domino is dangerous alone, but together they form a chain reaction capable of redefining the 21st century global order. As the second week unfolds, intelligence agencies, multinational corporations, and regional governments scramble to anticipate next moves. Emergency meetings are held in Washington, Moscow, Beijing, Bogota, and Brasilia. Analysts run simulations predicting everything from refugee flows to energy shortages, cyber attacks to financial collapses, yet no model can fully account for human behavior. And unpredictability remains the only certainty. In this environment, overreaction or miscalculation by a single actor state or non-state could transform a political crisis into a full-blown global disaster. In conclusion, the capture of Nicolás Maduro is far more than a political headline. It is the starting point of a complex, interwoven crisis with potentially catastrophic consequences. By destabilizing Venezuela's internal governance, triggering energy market shocks, intensifying great power competition, straining regional systems, creating humanitarian emergencies, fueling information warfare, inducing financial contagion, undermining international norms, and shocking the global psyche, the event threatens to unravel the delicate balance that has kept the world relatively stable in recent decades. The dominoes are falling, and the coming months will determine whether they can be arrested or whether they will set off a chain reaction capable of altering global history, global escalation, and the edge of collapse. By the third week after Nicolás Maduro's capture, the initial shock has transformed into a sustained crisis with far-reaching consequences. What started as a political upheaval in Venezuela has now escalated into a complex global event, exposing vulnerabilities in energy finance, geopolitics, and military strategy. Every major actor from nation-states to corporations and international organizations is forced to reassess strategies as the world teeters on the edge of instability. Internally, Venezuela descends further into chaos. Competing factions within the military and political elite begin to assert control over key regions, oil facilities, and ports. Some are loyal to Maduro's ideology, hoping to negotiate his release or reassert influence. Others align with foreign powers promising protection or economic incentives. These divisions spark localized clashes, particularly in regions rich with resources. Cities like Maracaibo and Puerto La Cruz experience sporadic violence as armed groups fight to control critical infrastructure. Civilians already suffering from shortages and hyperinflation find themselves trapped in a volatile environment, and the humanitarian situation deteriorates rapidly. Meanwhile, global energy markets reach unprecedented levels of volatility. With Venezuelan production effectively paralyzed and international investors uncertain about the future, crude oil prices soar. Countries heavily dependent on imports, especially in Asia and Europe, faced inflationary pressures as transportation, industry, and heating costs climb. Oil exporting nations attempt to capitalize on rising prices, but supply chain disruptions prevent stable market responses. Energy companies scramble to adjust, while governments debate strategic reserves, subsidies, and rationing measures. The lesson is clear. A single political shock in Venezuela has the potential to destabilize global energy systems in ways that ripple far beyond Latin America. Great powers respond with strategic maneuvering, raising the stakes even higher. Russia increases its intelligence presence in Latin America and strengthens ties with remaining pro-Maduro factions, signaling that any attempt to unilaterally dominate Venezuelan resources could provoke countermeasures. China leverages economic tools, offering loans, investments, and logistical support to stabilize regions sympathetic to its interests. Meanwhile, the United States reinforces its intelligence networks and military readiness across the hemisphere, conducting joint exercises with regional allies. These maneuvers, while defensive in tone, are easily interpreted by rival powers as aggressive posturing. The world suddenly finds itself in a precarious standoff reminiscent of Cold War dynamics, but far more unpredictable because of asymmetric threats, cyber warfare, and proxy conflicts. Regional instability intensifies as neighboring nations grapple with refugee influxes, security concerns, and political spillovers. Colombia and Brazil, already burdened by domestic challenges, experience border tensions as thousands of Venezuelans attempt to cross daily. Humanitarian agencies struggle to manage the flow, leading to overcrowded shelters and strained medical services. Caribbean nations, small in size but strategically significant, confront similar crises with limited resources to manage security and aid. The disruption fuels political polarization in the region, as citizens blame governments for failing to respond effectively. In short, a local crisis has metastasized into a regional humanitarian and security emergency. Financial systems remain under immense pressure. Emerging markets face capital flight as investors retreat to perceived safe havens. While global stock markets fluctuate violently in response to energy uncertainty and geopolitical risks, currency devaluations, rising interest rates, and debt stress threaten countries far removed from the Venezuelan epicenter. Multinational corporations operating in Latin America face disrupted supply chains, contract uncertainty, and logistical chaos. Even financial institutions in developed countries begin to account for cascading risks, as interconnected banking and investment networks amplify the impact of localized instability. What started as a political event has now become a systemic financial threat with global ramifications. Information warfare plays a decisive role in shaping perceptions and fueling tensions. Deepfakes, misleading news, and strategic leaks circulate rapidly online. Pro-Maduro factions portray the capture as an imperialist kidnapping, while opponents depict it as a liberation of democracy. The resulting confusion creates policy paralysis and public anxiety. Governments hesitate to act decisively for fear of international condemnation or domestic backlash, while citizens struggle to discern fact from fabrication. The digital battlefield amplifies instability, turning perception into a weapon as potent as military force. Military tensions escalate subtly but dangerously. While no formal war has broken out, small-scale skirmishes, border clashes, and proxy confrontations increasingly threaten to spiral. Regional militaries remain on high alert, prepared for contingencies that could escalate quickly if miscommunication occurs. Naval patrols increase in the Caribbean, and Air Force units conduct readiness exercises, all under the specter of potential escalation. Any misstep, an accidental strike, a misinterpreted movement, or an overreaction could ignite a broader conflict, making the Venezuelan crisis a flashpoint for wider warfare. Amid these pressures, global governance structures are tested. Organizations like the United Nations and the Organization of American States attempt mediation and coordination, but their influence is limited. Nations prioritize unilateral actions to protect resources, citizens, and strategic interests. Traditional diplomacy struggles to keep pace with rapid developments on the ground. Multilateral agreements are questioned, and trust between states deteriorates, reflecting a profound crisis in international norms and cooperation. The world realizes that existing institutions are ill-prepared to manage crises triggered by sudden political upheaval in strategically critical regions. The humanitarian dimension remains the most immediate and tangible threat to millions of lives. Hospitals, schools, and infrastructure collapse under pressure. Food insecurity grows and displacement accelerates. International aid faces logistical and political barriers, making relief uneven and insufficient. The human cost compounds the geopolitical and economic consequences, creating a cycle in which humanitarian crises intensify political instability, which in turn worsens social conditions. In essence, the Venezuelan crisis demonstrates the interdependence of human welfare, governance, and international security in the modern world. As the weeks turn into months, the cumulative effect becomes undeniable. The capture of Nicolás Maduro has triggered a global chain reaction. Energy markets remain volatile, great power rivalries intensify, regional security is strained, financial systems wobble, and humanitarian needs soar. The world is confronted with a stark reality. A single political event in Venezuela has revealed systemic vulnerabilities in energy, finance, security, and governance. These are not isolated shocks. They are interconnected crises with the potential to destabilize the global order. Yet even amid chaos, opportunities for resolution exist. International diplomacy, if executed with precision and cooperation, could stabilize the situation. Humanitarian intervention, energy market coordination, and transparent information dissemination could mitigate the worst effects. However, the window for action is narrow. Delays or miscalculations could transform a manageable crisis into a catastrophe, making every decision critical. In conclusion, the capture of Nicolás Maduro in Arling is far more than a local or regional event. It is a crisis with the potential to impact the entire world. From internal instability and energy shocks to regional security threats and financial contagion, the repercussions are complex and interlinked. History may judge this moment as a turning point in global affairs, where a single political event in a strategically vital nation reshaped the balance of power, tested international norms, and exposed vulnerabilities that have long been ignored. If you found this exploration insightful and want more in-depth analyses of global crises, energy markets, and hidden political dynamics, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Hidden History Vault for more exclusive content.